Okay, so I figured for Skella's birthday here on the May 7th, we are going to read Skella's Origin. So this is the first chapter of my book that is available now on Amazon. If you guys want to get this book for yourself, there are many other chapters other than this one that you can see, read, and all enjoy and things like that. The link for it will be in the description. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read this first chapter. I don't know what I'm going to do for imagery, but this is what we're going to be doing. We're gonna read this. So let's start with the beginning. It is this chapter. The entire book starts out with Skella Origin. Skella, an innocent green pony with deep blue eyes, sat at the very edge of a beach. She stared at her reflection, tearing up and feeling worse and worse with each passing second. Freak! The echo of an insult pains her. Abomination! Another echo. Skella closed her eyes tight and tried to ignore the insults echoing at her, but her will was not enough. She opened her eyes and angrily slammed her hoof into her reflection. She began crying as the echoes continued. Loser! The echo gets worse. Nobody! The echo finally used the worst of its arsenal. Skella stood up and leaped into the water. She swam downwards and continued swimming down as the echoes continued to beat her. Nobody. Nobody cares. Skella was reaching dangerous depths, and the bubbles from her mouth and nose were getting bigger. Light from the sun was no longer reaching Skella, and she was becoming surrounded in darkness. Finally, Skella gasped for air, but there was none. Only water. Skella cried as she opened her eyes wide one last time, only to see the darkness around her. There was nothing left. Skella was unconscious, and left to the ocean's might. And then, Skella coughed up water at the edge of the beach. Her body was still half in the water, and she was confused. I'm alive? She thought as her vision slowly went from blurry to clear. Something nudged Skella's leg, and she turned around to look towards the water. The dolphin looked back at her. He chirped and swam out towards the sea, doing a backflip into the air. Skella smiled at the dolphin. You saved me? Skella questioned the dolphin as it swam back up to her. A loud, shimmering noise, accompanied by a bright light shining on Skella's flank, took all of the sound in the area. When the light faded and the noise ended, Skella looked at her flank. The mark of a back-flipping dolphin was there. Skella was overjoyed at it. She chased her flank in circles for a moment to try and get the best look at it. She began jumping with joy. My mark! My mark! She cheered, the happiest she'd been since childhood. Skella did a few more circles, still trying to get the best angle of her new mark. She started chuckling, then leaped into the air at the dolphin. The dolphin caught Skella on their nose and threw her into the air, where she did backflip of her own. Skella landed in the water and swam towards the dolphin. She was still laughing and smiling with joy. Something finally liked her again. Sunset came after a long and fun day. Skella swam and played with the dolphin all day. She learned that she could speak dolphin and learned the dolphin's name was Mark. She rested on Mark's back while looking up at the sky. The dolphin was just as happy as she was. You're my only friend, Mark, Skella confessed. All the other ponies are mean to me. Bring? Mark responded. Skella paused and held a hoof out at the sky. She imagined everyone she knew and the marks on their flanks. Skella paused again. Different. Everyone else got their marks as kids, and I just got mine. Click, click! Skella toned over and patted the side of Mark's face. Aw, you're too sweet, Mark. Skella yawned and got into a more comfortable position. Meanwhile, on the beach, not far away, Dream Creamer was approaching the water. The orange unicorn with white hair and orange spots in his mane stopped at the water's edge when he noticed Skella on the water. Skella's ears perked up at the sound of Dream Creamer. She was already beginning to groan at it. What are you doing, loser? Dream Creamer called out to Skella. Skella angrily perked up and shouted at him. Get out of here, Creamer! Dream Creamer flaunted his cloak and his horn glowed orange. The orange glow was his magic, lifting Skella off of Mark. Skella tried her hardest to reach out and hold on to Mark, but there was nothing she could do. Skella kicked her legs frantically in fear and desperation. Mark looked on with confusion and concern. Dream Creamer laughed maniacally as Skella reached the beach and was lifted over him. Stop it! Skella demanded. Dream Creamer smiled and stopped abruptly at the sight of Skella's flank. He turned her upside down with his magic and lowered her so that her head was touching the ground. He grinned deviously at the mark. So you got a mark now. Guess that finally makes you an adult, Dream Creamer mocked. Skella feared what was next, but she remained confident and demanding. Please let me down! Skella shouted with a hint of desperation. I can do that. Dream Creamer lifted Skella twice as high as before and slammed her on the ground, back first, with his magic. Skella tensed up in pain, but it wasn't over. Dream Creamer grabbed her with his magic again and threw her across the beach. Mark understood the gravity of the situation and raced along the beach's edge, trying to find some way he could help Skella. Mark was frustrated that he was bound by the sea. Skella was thrown again. Crack! Skella winced in pain. Her leg was broken, and it was clear to everyone. Skella groaned while crawling the best she could. Her attempt to crawl away amused Dream Creamer even further. Dream Creamer walked towards Skella slowly and menacingly. He was just getting started with Skella and was ready to make things worse for her. Dream Creamer stopped when he made it to Skella. He stood over her, grinning. Skella knew what was next and wanted to escape it. She began crying at the thought of what Dream Creamer had planned. Skella rolled onto her back and looked around herself for something to help her. Mark was at the edge of the water, watching her with greatest concern. Skella felt sorry for him, for what he would soon see. Dream Creamer was getting closer. Skella found a rock and became determined to fight back for herself and for Mark. She reached for the rock with her non-broken leg. She got a hold of it and threw it at Dream Creamer, the hardest she could. "Leave me alone!" Skella screamed as the rock flew through the air. Dream Creamer caught the rock with his magic. He looked at it and chuckled before tossing it over his shoulder. The brief distraction was enough for Skella to get up and limp towards the woods, dragging her broken leg across the sand. Unfortunately, magic can't be outran or outlimped. Dream Creamer used his magic to grab onto Skella's tail just as she began to reach the woods. Skella was dragged by the tail, being pulled closer and closer to Dream Creamer. Strands of Skella's tail were being pulled out and her belly was being scratched by seashells and small rocks. Dream Creamer pulled her to him and flipped her over to her back. He used his magic to keep her pinned on the ground. Skella refused to look at him and his grinning face. "Please," Skella began. "I'm just a nobody. You're wasting your time on me." Dream Creamer used his hoof to turn Skella's head so she was facing him. Skella barely peeked, her eyes open. "Which is why no one will care what I'm about to do to you." Dream Creamer spoke softly yet menacingly. Skella cried while looking at Dream Creamer. He smiled again just before a large rock hit him in the side of the head. Dream Creamer's blood spilled out on the side of his head and sprayed onto Skella's face as he fell onto the ground. Skella looked out to the sea where the rock was thrown from. It was Mark. Mark squeed. Dream Creamer held a hoof over his injury, then checked his hoof. He was bleeding badly. Skella rolled over and crawled a little bit towards Mark. She stopped and held out a hoof. "Mark, no! Just swim away!" Skella begged him. Dream Creamer was finally standing again, and he was furious. Mark squeaked again as he did a flip and flung another rock at Dream Creamer by whipping it with his tail. The rock zoomed through the air, but Dream Creamer caught this one with his magic. Skella looked at him. Her heart stopped. Dream Creamer was staring Mark down. Dream Creamer launched the rock at Mark with his magic. It was much faster than Mark's fling. The rock hit Mark in the head, and at the same time, the dolphin on Skella's flank began to bleed from the head. Mark sank into the water, blood filling the water where he once was. "No!" Skella screamed. Skella's mark was turning more and more blood red as her leg began to straighten up and heal. The mark on Skella's flank was now a bloody, back-flipping dolphin, and her leg was healed. Skella stood up with all the fury she would ever have and slammed a hoof into Dream Creamer's face. It was quick, sudden, and nearly lethal. Dream Creamer was unconscious on the ground, but Skella didn't care. She wanted revenge for Mark. She had finally met her breaking point, and everyone was going to pay for it, starting with Dream Creamer. Skella mercilessly began beating Dream Creamer with her front hooves. Night came, and she was still beating him, even though he had long been dead for several hours. Day came again, and Skella was still beating him. Her mind was gone, fixated on one single thing. Kill! 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 Another day came, and Skella continued her beating. Dream Creamer's body wasn't even recognizable anymore. It was just a mutilated corpse with parts of his cloak sticking to different pieces. The next night came, and Skella never stopped. She wasn't even remotely tired. The blood and bits of Dream Creamer were so pulverized that they had become infused with the sand. Skella hit the bloody sand a few more times, then stopped. Skella chuckled with insanity and gratification. Skella continued laughing as she wandered towards the woods. "Did you see how well my leg healed?" Skella cheered to herself. Skella wandered through the woods for a few moments. While thinking of her fast healing leg, she stopped at a thorny bush. It looked as though it would severely cut someone if they fell into it. Skella was intrigued by it. "I wonder what else my body is capable of," she softly spoke to herself. Skella leaped into the thorny bush and squirmed around in it, letting every thorn she could stab into her and scratch her up. Soon the leaves of the bush were covered in drops of her blood. Skella smiled through the whole thing and enjoyed every second. She laughed and continued her self-torture while taking pleasure in every single slice and stab. Skella had fallen deeper into madness. She was slightly older now and had created a set of blue cuffs with spikes on them. She wore one on each leg and had used them to cut off the mark on her flank some time ago. In the mark's place was a bloody patch of skin with no fur to hide it. Several scratches covered Skella's body from her neck to the ends of her legs. Her tail had even less hair than before. Skella had a unicorn with 2 horns pinned to the ground by a stick that stabbed through one of his legs and into the ground. It was Birthmark. He had purple and white hair and a hoodie that was torn to shreds from Skella's attacks. His mark was a large black dot. Skella was on top of Birthmark's back, making extra sure he couldn't break free. Birthmark kept his eyes tightly shut in fear. "Now that you know where I came from, it's time for my favorite part," Skella spoke. "Please, just leave me for dead," Birthmark begged. Skella used her blue spiked cuffs to scratch a couple of lines across Birthmark's back, up to his neck. Birthmark cried in pain. Skella smiled at Birthmark's pain and moved her cuffs to his face so he could see his own blood on the ends of the spikes. Birthmark looked at it with unimaginable fear. Was this how he was going to die? Skella leaned closer to Birthmark's ears. "I always get the name of my clients," Skella explained. Skella pressed the cuff against Birthmark's cheek, just below his left eye. It was just enough to make him start bleeding there. Birthmark feared his eye would soon be taken from him, and remained as still as possible. "So," Skella whispered, "what is yours?" Birthmark shook in fear. He wasn't sure if saying his name would be his last words, or if he would somehow be spared by this green demon. Skella pressed her cuffs against Birthmark's cheek, slightly harder, and Birthmark shook harder. He felt he had no choice, so he started to speak. He stuttered and couldn't get past the B for a moment. Birthmark, Birthmark muttered. Skella froze. The name Mark echoed in her head, and she stepped away from Birthmark. "Mark?" she questioned. Birthmark noticed right away that something wasn't right. Skella no longer sounded menacing or terrifying. She sounded sorry and afraid. He couldn't see, but Skella was tearing up. She shook her head a few times while backing away further, eventually running away with the happy memories of Mark the Dolphin haunting her. And that is the first chapter of Birthmark. That is a book that you can now get on Amazon. It's been on Amazon for a while. The link for that is in the description below. The next chapter follows Birthmark's origin, and then we get into a lot more stuff that happens, and we learn all kinds of crazy things about Birthmark and Skella in this book. I hope you enjoyed. This was very different from what I normally do, so if you are watching this and you're not already subscribed, welcome to the channel. I normally make Ponytown content or MLP-related content. I also do some VR stuff here and there. I've been doing a Minecraft VR series on the side here. It's been a lot of fun, and welcome to the channel. I do hope that you would check out one of the other videos if this wasn't your forte, if this wasn't something that you necessarily want to watch all the time. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and doing all of those wonderful things like that. Because when you do wonderful things like that, not only to get access to wonderful content such as this, but you also get to become wonderful yourself. And I think we all want that. So do those wonderful things, and until next time, stay wonderful.